In 1969, at an oceanside hotel in Honolulu, Hawaii, a young woman arrived in the night. In the morning, she flung open her hotel bedroom curtains to reveal a sprawling parking lot, and in the distance, the famous Waikiki Beach. That young woman was Joni Mitchell, a folk singer born in 1943. In Mitchell's world, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War. Woodstock would happen a few months later, and only 1 year later, the first Earth Day, on April 22nd, 1970. Her generation was one famous for its turmoil, social commentary, activism, and frankly, hippies. It was a far out time to be a folk singer, and a spark of inspiration to comment on the changing environment happened in a pink hotel that will lead to Joni Mitchell's composing The Big Yellow Taxi, or more commonly known as Put Up a Parking Lot.
With a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot.
In her setup, in her first lyric, she talks about they paid paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. The pink hotel that Joni Mitchell talks about was emblematic of a trend in the United States. That was suburbanization, increased leisure travel, and increased consumer spending. After World War II, when the troops came home en masse, they wanted the American dream, a family, a home, a car. In response, a new sort of home arose, the suburban home outside of the polluted city centers, with highway access to those city centers. The first of these experimental housing developments was in New York, known as Levittown. In fact, the image in the background is Levittown. It embodied the new America, a home for every family. However, these were new spaces that required a lot of land. These were homes more manufactured than built. We're all familiar with them today, a set of building plans on a tiny parcel of ground, however, hundreds of them. It also meant clearing large swaths of land as neighbors, ironically, began living closer and closer to each other. This meant that the physical landscape had also changed. Joni Mitchell's generation largely did not grow up in the country or in the city. They grew up in the sprawling suburbs. And just as the physical landscape changed, so too was there a sort of psychological need to escape. I would recommend Adam Rome's Bulldozers in the Countryside that talks about this. But suffice it to say that the suburbs was a home that people needed to escape regularly.
They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum.
It is likely, according to Dave Donnelly of the Honolulu Star Bulletin, that the tree museum Mitchell refers to in this lyric actually refers to the Foster Botanical Gardens, the oldest botanical gardens in Honolulu featuring native Hawaiian plants. Nature tourism may be an old concept. However, it's likely that this left an imprint in Mitchell because less than 50 years ago, nature would have surrounded Americans. Now, people had to visit nature in contained spaces. There was no more space for nature when the world needed to make space for cars, parking lots, highways, and buildings, and people now pay a premium to see nature itself. On a side note, today you too can go see the gardens for $5 a ticket.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Hey, farmer, farmer, put away the DDT now. Give me spots on my apples, or leave me the birds and the bees. Please.
First synthesized in 1874, DDT eventually found its use not just among farmers, but everywhere in the United States. From fields to suburban neighborhoods, in fact, trucks would spray plumes of DDT filling the air. So unafraid of this pesticide, children played in these thick DDT clouds. No one really disturbed their routines to avoid it. DDT was simply not perceived as a threat. For many, DDT was the benign World War II hero at home and abroad. In fact, General MacArthur, in his Pacific Ocean campaign, wrote privately that this will be a long war. For every division I am facing the enemy, I must count a 2nd Division hospital and 3rd Division convalescing from debilitating diseases carried by insects. As early as 1935, bacteriologist Hans Zinser had written his famous work, Rats, Lice, and History, that disease had, quote, decided more campaigns than Caesar, Hannibal, Napoleon, and all the inspector generals in history. The Allied forces used DDT to control not only mosquitoes and mass spraying scales, but would actually spray it directly onto people to control the spread of diseases in war-destroyed cities and towns across Europe. DDT was seen not only as a war hero, but a domestic one too. In fact, after World War II, its use becomes the predominant method of insect control in the US. For more on the development, I included a link to a U.S. Navy World War II propaganda film describing the development of DDT and its use abroad. It introduces DDT as this helpful, very benign product that can only help people. Importantly, DDT's use found its high watermark use during the Cold War as part of the, quote, endless frontier of science, as so coined by Vannevar Bush of the Office of Scientific Research. DDT was just a part of that human advancement, not unlike sonar, radar, penicillin, and the atomic bomb. This also meant that farming was becoming a science. As Wendell Berry would describe it when he said farming has become a science, and that, quote, purporting to increase the sophistication of the humble art of farming actually brutally oversimplifies it. And part of that brutality was the use of pesticides. But by 1969, Mitchell's time, farming had already changed. The quaint Jeffersonian republic ideal based in the concept of every American as a subsistence farmer had long eroded. Now, in this endless frontier of science, farming had become big business and DDT its powerful ally. In 1971, President Nixon would actually appoint Earl Butz to head the USDA. His plan was to get rid of subsistence farming altogether and replace it with an efficient, centralized food system that could, in his words, feed the world, with giant sweeping monoculture farms owned by a select few. And he implemented it, which would lead to even larger swaths of land being plowed and covered in DDT. The lyric, "I don't care about spots on my apples, leave me the birds and the bees," actually echoes the 1962 book Silent Spring, a book written by biologist Rachel Carson, who synthesized and then artfully told the destructive story of DDT, causing the disappearance of birds, bees, and small animals. Carson's writing was clear and its impact huge, turning the DDT war hero into a waiting catastrophe. And it actually undermined the Cold War progress story of the endless frontier of science. The EPA did eventually ban DDT for domestic use. However, and no one alive in 2020 will find this surprising, DDT remained a contentious political subject into the 2000s, with the Competitive Enterprise Institute operating a website called Rachel Carson Was Wrong, claiming that Carson's book was actually a false alarm, and the result was millions of deaths by malaria just to save a few birds and a few bees. However, Mitchell's song captured a cultural moment that recognized science, but thinking about the long-term invisible side effects could lead us not to the endless frontier, but into a slow, invisible self-destruction. To sum up, Big Yellow Taxi actually captured the cultural moment. It gives us the setup and the political willpower for the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the creation of the EPA. I spent so much time focusing on this because it's important.
It always seemed to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone.